Hi, welcome to Virtual Indie Book Fest. We are doing a panel on high fantasy. We have authors with us today, Dustin Cummings, Bianca Wang Palindo, and Katie L. Carroll. They are going to introduce themselves as well and drop their social medias before we get into all of our wonderful questions about their amazing books that they've been writing. So, who would like to go first and drop their socials and where people can find them and the title of their book there?
I guess I'll go first because I'm right next to you on the screen. So my name is Dustin Cummings. My genre is fantasy, science fiction. You can find me on Twitter at Dorenavant2020, and my website is dustinrcummings.com. I'm also one of the authors with a small press, Shadow Spark Publishing. So if you go to Shadow Spark Publishing, you can find my author profile there as well.
Hi, I'm Katie L. Carroll, and I write books for kids of all different ages, and I have a young adult fantasy series, The Elixir Chronicles. And my website is katielcarroll.com. I'm on Twitter at katielcarroll.com as well. Instagram, Katie L. Carroll Author. And I'm also on Facebook if you want to search for me there too.
Well, finally, hi, I'm Bianca. I recently published my first YA NA book, Between Demons and Deities. You can find me at Bianca Loves Books on Instagram. And nice to meet everyone.
Okay, so those are our authors, and you guys can follow them, like, subscribe, pre-order, be a good fan. And we'll get into our questions so you can know more about their books. So, my first question is for everyone. What are the top 3 things that inspired the worlds and characters in your stories? Because fantasy books have a lot of world building, character building. What would be the top 3 things that definitely made you want to write and you had to have in your stories?
I guess I'll go first because I'm next to you, if you guys don't mind. So again, my series is called Exiles of the Gilded Moon. The first book, Empire's Wake, came out last year in November, and the second book, Kingdom's Edge, is coming out in a month. Pre-orders actually start today. So the thing that interests me in terms of world building, my own history. My family is from the Caribbean, and my books really kind of are taking place in an alternate universe, and the characters, they live on different moons around kind of a dormant planet, and one moon kind of dominates the rest of the moons. So I kind of looked at my Caribbean background in terms of colonialism, the interaction between cultures, and that kind of influences the setting for my book. Also, places that I personally visited in terms of just kind of the landscape, the architecture, kind of the clothes that people wear, the foods that they cook, and as well as just familial dynamics in terms of just how do siblings relate, how do parents relate to their children, how do friends relate. So those are the 3 influences when I think of my series.
Okay. Katie?
So mine are young adult. I have the first one's Elixir Bound, which came out a few years ago, and then Elixir Saved came out last summer. And I think the primary thing that influenced me, when I was 19, my 16-year-old sister very unexpectedly passed away, and she's still a medical mystery to this day. We don't really know what happened. Something attacked her lungs. So for me, I was creating a world for her. That was kind of the primary thing that I wanted to do. She loved fantasy, so it was kind of to carry on her memory. And so more than any of my other books, a lot of family relationships come in, primarily with the characters, where I have a lot of characters based on people I actually know. And the settings, a lot came from our family trips that we took when we were younger. We did a lot of hiking and camping. So the mythology of the world is very nature-based and very feminine in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Cool. And then
Bianca?
I'll go. So the top three things narrow down to my personal background, being inspired by other fantasy media, and then finally just our world and history in general. I'll start with my background and experiences. So I'm biracial. I'm Taiwanese Mexican American, and I use that kind of experience to develop my world and my characters. Some of my characters are bicultural. My world is split into basically two large empires. Um, each empire is inspired by both one side of my background. So that inspired a lot of my world building and characters. And then being inspired by other fantasy like books, shows, manga, a lot of magic, demons, gods and goddesses. Like that's just from me reading and writing a lot of fantasy. And then finally, just our world. You know, building a fantasy world is kind of daunting sometimes. There's just a lot of different aspects to think about, like politics, geography, economics, magic systems, and really just taking a step back, looking at our world and how things came to be. Like, how do these different aspects impact each other? Um, I drew a lot of inspiration from our world history to create my world as well.
Okay. Those are great, like inspirations for like what makes you write and like build your story. I like that you guys all have like a little bit of you in your stories. Especially since it's fantasy. Like sometimes everyone thinks it has to be super magical. Sometimes it could just, have little bits of your personalities and life. What are some things that you would want your readers to take away from your stories? Like, if you had to maybe pick an overall arcing message, or just something you want readers to definitely get when they get to the last chapter.
That's a really good question. I'd say the major messages that I'd like from people to get from the Exiles of a Gilded Moon series is really the importance of family and friendships in terms of going through, difficult times. One of the major cruxes in my book is my series is just the collapse of an empire and how do people kind of survive amid the ashes, so to speak. So just the importance of those relationships in terms of, going through one of the most traumatic periods in those characters' lives. And then the realization that everything's impermanent. What appears to be something, mighty and long-lasting is truly ephemeral. And, things came before it, things will come after it.
So for me, I think in everything that I write, and this is something I talk about a lot when I talk to kids, whether that's school visits or at libraries, is kind of finding your own magic. So in my fantasy stories, they're very questy, adventure, and there's magic in them, and the characters are often finding the magic within themselves, and it's a literal magic. And I think as an author, I like to send out the message of, like, for me, the death of my sister helped me find my magic of creating stories and allowed me sort of the freedom to pursue that dream. And I like to sort of pass that message on to other people. Like, maybe it's not the thing that ends up spend most of your time on in the day, but if you could find one or two things in your life that brings magic to yourself and that you can share with other people, then to sort of pursue that.
Cool. I really liked both of Dustin and Katie's messages. I think for my book, mine is very much about not forcing yourself into boxes that you don't have to put yourself in, or that society puts people in. I think the analogy that I like to think of are like cats and boxes, where cats might go around in different boxes. They'll sit around in one that's really comfortable. If they don't like that box, they might jump into a different box, or maybe not in any box at all. But you would imagine that the cat wouldn't be so happy if someone tried to force it into a box. And really, I think people kind of function similarly. Like some people like to categorize themselves in different ways, but some people get a lot of personal contention with their identity. And just being able to like reflect on yourself and know that you don't have to constrain yourself. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I would like a reader to have from my book.
Okay. I like that. I like like what they want the readers to take, like family, like perseverance, and just be kind of like being yourself, which is kind of a great message to have. If you could give any advice to any up and coming writers in your genre, what would it be? I mean, you guys have like done self-publishing and stuff. What would your tips to new writers in the high fantasy genre be?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest thing that I learned was really reaching out. Before, I'd say at least 3 years ago, these 2 books that I had, they were just literally sitting on my computer, and I'd peek at them occasionally, and kind of hope one day that I get to publish them. But through meeting through a chance encounter with a roommate that I met in Seattle when I lived there a few years ago, she really pushed me to kind of get my work out there. So I met an editor. I really honed the first book at least, and then I got comfortable enough to query it, and I found a small publisher, Shadow Spark, who signed me. So I think the biggest message is if you are really passionate about writing, you'll know it, because it's everything you'll think about outside of your other work or duties. And just keep that passion alive by writing, by editing, and by reaching out, most importantly. Because I think to my particular case, if I never reached out and tried to link up with people who were interested in it, I would have gotten to the point of getting it edited and then finding a publisher. So I think that's the key, reaching out.
I love that, like, go for it attitude. That's so important in publishing. I think for me, particularly when it comes to fantasy, is to keep really good track of the world you're building. Keep like a glossary or something, because I know when I was writing the second book, so the first book is sort of a there and back again tale with a very like limited cast. You're sort of in the setting of the forest. And then as I got into the second book, there's 3 different point of view characters that go off in 3 different directions in the world. And the world was getting so much bigger. And I had thought about a lot of these things beforehand, but I also had to make sure everything meshed. And there was a really long period of time between when I first started this series in my head and then since the second book has come out. And I've grown a huge amount of it as a person. So it was sort of this balance between keeping what I had established in an earlier book and remembering all those things, and then adding on to that and keeping track of sort of everything that I created in this world. And often having to reference back the other book, the first book, when I was writing the second, because I didn't do a great job of keeping track of everything as I was going along. So I think that's something that is good to keep in mind as you're starting, as opposed to when you're, already on the process.
Yeah, great advice from the previous 2 authors. I think mine is more general for writing. I think really practice reading and writing. Just take baby steps, or 1 step at a time. Like for me, my first story wasn't fantastic. Like I wrote it in like 4th grade. But at least that taught me that I could put my thoughts onto sometimes literally a page. And then the next time I wrote, I taught myself that, wow, I can finish a story, like even if it was 20 pages long, 20 wide world pages long. And really just, taking a step at a time to teach you that you can do steps at a time, that you can learn, that you'll improve along the way the more that you do write. And then the other piece of advice that I would like to give is try to change your framework or the way that you view your writing. Like it can be hard to share what you wrote. There's a lot of things to keep track of in fantasy or just, you know, in any kind of writing. And it can be easy to get scared of failure. So we can think of questions like, what happens if I fail? Or what if I don't finish this book? But I think we need to remind ourselves of the other side of that coin. Like, what happens if I finish this book? Or what happens if this book that I am scared to share, but I end up sharing is someone's favorite book? What happens if someone sends me fan art of my characters? And I think we need to remind ourselves of, like, it can be scary, but, you know, think of the good side or the, you know, the upside scenario.
I love all of that. Like, just, you know, just doing it and like not actually being afraid. Like, I think a lot of us get caught up in our heads about like, oh, no one's gonna like my book, or like being scared to just do it. Like, that's great. And then I also like the keeping the track of what Katie said about keeping track of your world that you're building, because I personally have gotten lost in my own world and could not get back to where I was started from. So I might try that one. You guys have given great first advice to hopefully some new authors take it and like they start their journey. Individual author questions. My first question is for Katie. You have a trio of heroes, and you kind of touched on how like they kind of go off on their own adventure in your story. How do you keep their individual quest and the main story in line with your storytelling? Was it a lot? You said like you had to go back and forth. So did you have to do a lot of pre-planning for your characters in the story, or how did that go for you?
So I knew usually I'm the kind of writer that has a skeleton idea in my mind. So I kind of know like A to B to C. And then I fill in the blanks as I draft. So I'm more of a pantser as opposed to a plotter. For those of you not familiar, pantser is someone that flies by the seat of their pants when they write and they just sort of go. And a plotter is someone who maybe has a much stronger outline and an idea of all their plot points before they start writing. So I do have an idea of where I'm going. I think for these characters, so each one of them at some point in their lives has been saved by this magical healing elixir. And now they're at a point where there's some conflict in the world and they're heading out into the world, in some cases, sort of for like the first time. And they sort of get to a point where they have to decide, like, how far are they willing to push their second chance at life? What are they willing to sacrifice sort of for the greater good? So they all start out together in one place, then they all go off in different directions and they all sort of come back together. So I originally started writing it where I was alternating point of views as I was writing, which helped to kind of keep it fresh for myself. And then I got to a point, which ended up being about a third of the way through the book, where I felt like I needed to just be deep into one point of view. So then I started where I would stay longer in one point of view as I was drafting. So I kind of went off in one direction for a while, then I'd come back and go off in another direction. So then after I finished the draft, almost finished the draft, I kind of decided how I wanted to put all those storylines together again. And then I wrote the ending where they all kind of come back together at the end. So it was a little piecemeal. It was a little disorganized, but that's sometimes how my process works. And I encourage any writers to explore different ways of writing, because sometimes you don't know what's going to work for you. And sometimes it's different for each project. I've had a little bit different process for each book that I've written. And sometimes you just don't know what's going to work until you do it. And sometimes something works for a third of the book and then you got to switch directions. Both of these Elixir books have taken me a very long time to write. They're very personal projects, so they can be a little emotionally difficult for me to write at times. So I think having to switch gears sometimes was okay, and I had to sort of let myself do that, even if I felt like I was floundering a little bit.
I get that, and I kind of like, because I've mostly heard of people being planners instead of fly by the seat of the panters. So good to know other people out there actually. You know, I kind of probably more of a planner myself. So that's good, and then it's also nice that you take a little bit of time to like step back and then get back into it. Okay. So I will go to the next question, which is for Bianca. What inspired the way you wrote both of your prologue and your chapter 1? I really like. I read the prologue and the first chapter, and I honestly have to say I've never read a book that started like that, and I really, really enjoyed it. How it was separate but connected. What inspired you to write it that way? Like, was that always your
Yes.
plan? Or?
Yes.
It's unique.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think this is just philosophically kind of bringing back to the point I brought when I was talking about world building, kind of thinking about history. So I really like exploring history, like why are characters the way they are? Why are the characters where they are? You know, and thinking about those questions really makes like helps understand your world and characters. And that's just kind of how the prologue in chapter 1 is kind of set up, where the prologue is sometime in the past, and it's actually kind of the driver for the events in the rest of the story, although you don't um, fully find out until towards the end. Um, and also, it's a nice way to showcase the two different, like the night and day, the more Chinese inspired empire and the more Mexica inspired empire. Um, and then the two different characters, there are two different kind of troubles, but you see the two starting points, and you can see how over time throughout the book, like they come and merge where you wouldn't have thought that was connected. But like history, like people might think it's separate, but it's always connected to the present. And that's kind of the way I approach the prologue, where the reader's going to find out about certain things before the characters do, and the prologue helps kind of guide that realization. So yeah, just the interconnection of past and present, and how the story will change over time.
It was really great. Like, I strongly suggest someone like read your book, because I was like, that's something I've never seen before. Our next question is for Dustin. Your book, Exile of the Gilded Moon, has a really good main character and a world that has a lot. Do you have more for that series planned? Because more in that set in that world that the book starts in, because it's a pretty big world that could like span series. Do you have plans like that for that, or?
I definitely have. Thank you very much for saying that. The world is very expansive, and again, it encompasses 4 moons around a dormant planet. All the people on the moons are descendants of colonizers from that dormant planet, and one moon kind of dominates the rest in the form of like a realm or an empire. So the main character Darshana, he is 18 years old, just trying to figure out his way through the world, and obviously, as the synopsis says, everything kind of falls apart. But as the series goes on, the world gets bigger in terms of his understanding. And the way I started it out is like, it's just the reader and the main character Darshma, and then slowly everything expands out as he gets an understanding, because he's naive like the reader, and together they kind of learn about the world. I definitely have book 3 in the works right now. I certainly can see, prologues in terms of, some of the other characters, just as, kind of to highlight different changes that this world has gone through. But it's definitely been a world that's been, kind of a part of my thinking and approach to creative writing, since I was a teenager. So it's, kind of a fictional place that I've kind of honed through writing over the years, and I could definitely see contributing to it, like in a prologue and subsequent books, and perhaps a different series even.
Okay. Good. That's exciting. Like, it's good that it's gonna be like more, and people look out for that. And so, my next on the fly question, for you all to answer. If you had to like do an elevator pitch of your book right now to our audience that's watching, what would be your elevator pitch on why they should definitely click add to cart on your series or books? Besides the fact that you're a great writer, like, what's one aspect would be like, hey, I have this in my book, you should. You guys could go in order, or whoever wants to answer.
I can go if you'd like. So I guess my elevator pitch would be, 18-year-old boy trying to find his way in the world, with a family that's caring, but trying to push him to do more despite his reluctance. The world falls apart around him. He gets captured as a slave and has to find his way back home.
Perseverance, got it.
All right, I guess I'm next. So I guess my kind of quick pitch for Elixir Saved is 3 lives saved by the elixir, 3 lives bound by it. What will they do with their second chances? And also I'll throw in there that there's these giant dragonfly-like creatures that are really cool in it. So definitely check those out. And also the Ice Queen. I love her. She is like up in this forest that's really snowy. And she has all these other they're called the queens. They're like slighted lovers that they all have kind of holed up there. So I like them a lot.
Okay.
Cool. And a quick description would be Mage goes on a journey to save her friend, and along the way discovers secrets about her own history, and also uncovers a plot that threatens the world, and she has to do this while juggling both demons and deities that she meets along the way. And some additional features about my book is that it includes biracial, non-binary, and other LGBTQ characters, as well as kind of influences from both Western and Eastern kind of mythologies.
That was great. You guys are amazing. I'm gonna ask that like you guys drop your socials again before we end. Do you guys want to go in order, or like just so where people can find you and where they can find your books? I know some are on Amazon and your websites, so if you guys want to drop that information for the public.
Thanks again for inviting me. You can find me at DustinRcummings.com, Shadowspark.com, and my books are on Amazon. Just type in Dustin Cummings or Exiles of a Gilded Moon, and you'll find them on Amazon and iBooks.
Oh, thanks, Ashley, for those great questions. I really enjoyed answering them. So you can find me at katielcarroll.com. I do have books available for sale on my website if you would like signed copies. And you can actually find the Elixir books, which are the first one's Elixir Bound, the second one's Elixir Saved. You don't have to read them in order if you don't want to. Pretty much anywhere books are sold. And I also have a middle grade named Pirate Island. and a picture book that I did not illustrate it, illustrated by a very talented woman named Erica Baird. That's called The Bedtime Night. Again, those are available on my website or wherever books are sold. And if you just look up my name on most of the social media, it's Katie L. Carroll or Katie L. Carroll author, depending on which one.
Cool. And my Insta handle is Bianca Loves Books. I forgot to mention my Twitter handle earlier, which is Bianca Wang 00. And then you can find my books on Amazon, on Nook, on iBooks. You can search that through my name, which I believe I'm the only Bianca Wang Polendo out there, and or through my book title, Between Demons and Deities.
I want to thank for joining us today. With us. Follow, like, pick up, add to your cart, and all that fun stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the panel today, and you subscribe to their books and pick up either the first copy or the next copy and become hooked on them, because high fantasy deserves all the love. Thank you guys for watching, and thanks for coming.